Welcome back to part 2 of our delicious conversation with Andrew Hisey. Andrew has a background in finance, in motorsports, in strategic business consulting. He's done quite a lot of stuff, and he's definitely been on this very entrepreneurial journey. Today, he is the president and CEO of GoStation, which you may recognize from being in different parts of the country of plugging in your EV vehicle to charge it. But there's much more to the whole EV recharging world than meets the eye. We talked a lot about where all that's going and how it's all changing as we move into the next phase of this. We've come out of, as Andrew talked about, phase 1, and we're entering into phase 2, which is these microgrids and better communication between data sets so that people can actually get better service quicker. We talked about the dirty grid versus a clean grid and how to work all that, where that's going. There's a lot in part 1. If you, for some reason, didn't get it, click back, go to part 1. I'm sure you'll find it quite fascinating. We want to pick up the conversation here and go to a little bit deeper into this, because in part 1, one of the things I talked about was that the whole EV thing, electric vehicle thing, and clean energy, even in many ways, is still pretty new, and we tend to think of it as being something, particularly if you're going to live in North America, being owned by Tesla. I even mentioned at the end of the last show that Elon Musk has become kind of a divisive character in that he's moved from entrepreneurial innovator to political figure, and certainly causing some ruffled feathers in that direction. Whether you're with him or against him is not my point. My point is that Tesla is not the dominant figure of EV vehicles. In fact, the biggest in the world is a company called BYD, I believe, which is a Chinese company who sell more EV vehicles than Tesla any day of the week around the world. They are massively successful. And if you tend to go look at them, and I do, they are spectacular vehicles that are very reasonably priced. Certainly if you're buying them in China or buying them in Europe without all the crazy tariffs, these are beautiful cars that outclass Tesla by far. So it's not Tesla that owns the space, just so you understand that. There's more to be unpacked there, because we also have to look at long-haul vehicles, and we look at trucking, and that trucking is one of the most dirty of all those consumers of gas, etc. And that's moving. But again, with all of this and with AI, as we talked in part 1, there's also the impact on jobs and how all that's going to. So we got the impact on the grid, the power sources, then the job thing, the environment. There's a lot of pieces in there. And as I said, different forms of alternative transportation. As I mentioned at the end of the last part, Toyota have, for some reason, which we can discuss here, pulled away a little bit from the whole electric thing. They were probably the first hybrid. They pulled away from the electric, and now they've gone to hydrogen. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, good for them. I think hydrogen has been sort of 20 years away for the last 20 years, maybe more. And so I'm certainly not a scientist. I think there are a lot of really difficult, complex problems to make hydrogen widely commercially viable. I will say, though, you mentioned long haul trucks. It is the right technology for certain use cases, particularly long haul trucks, like semi trucks that drive thousands of miles in a day or two. Battery electric vehicles are not suited for that use case. They are ideal, however, for certain things like Class 8 drayage trucks, moving containers around marine ports or rail yards. They're ideal for diesel vehicle replacement where diesels are idling for a long time, like airport tugs or baggage handling carts. So that sort of speaks to my comment in part 1 about EVs not going to be 100%. What we need to be thinking about is what is the right technology for the use case. And so good for Toyota, good for them for investing in that. And by the way, I will comment, after their executive chairman or non-executive chairman, whoever it was that made that comment, I think Toyota and Lexus launched like 5 new EVs. Maybe read the headlines, but also dive a level deeper and see, okay, they're investing across the board, and that got them a lot of really good headlines, and I hope they succeed.
I think that we all tend to jump on bandwagons. And so, that tendency to go, oh, it's all electric and everything should be electric is a little overhyped by us. We do it to ourselves psychologically. but we do it in all kinds of things. Okay, electric's out and now it's hydrogen. The analogy I've given before, and I think works, is that I am old enough that I had a massive vinyl collection. And then I stupidly gave up my vinyl collection for a cassette tape collection. And then I gave up those to have a CD collection. And now I don't have any of them. And guess what? My vinyl collection would be worth a shit ton of money now. It's a different sound altogether. But the point is that as something becomes less available, it becomes more valuable. So I think there will always be gasoline vehicles. Somebody's going to be driving an old Mustang or an old Corvette, and you're going to see those probably even in 50 years that are gas powered. You'll also see ones that look exactly the same, but they'll be electric powered or some other alternative fuel powered, but they'll look the same. But the old noisy gasoline ones, they're still going to be around. It's just going to be very wealthy individuals who can afford that. Because I think there's a nostalgic drive towards these things.
I sure hope they're around. My wife and I have a 1951 Ford F1 we drove away from our wedding in, and we love it. And I don't intend to get rid of it. And I don't even intend to convert it to electric, but there are others that would be really exciting. I have a friend here in Austin area that has patents for a battery electric conversion business. And they're doing a lot of business with fleets, but they're also releasing basically for collectors to transition old Broncos and old Fords and old International Scouts to electric. And I think that's awesome. As long as there's a passion for it, I think it's great.
Yeah. My buddy's trying to talk me into, there's a place here that does it with cars, and he's trying to talk me into doing it with my car. My car's not that old. It's only 10 years old, but I've kept it because it's a classic. It's a Jag, and they don't make these kind of Jags anymore. And he's like, yeah, but you could put an electric engine. I'm like, yeah, nah, not yet.
Maybe someday. But like you said, if not, then it's okay. That's my point, is that as a futurist, not an EV evangelist, the future is really exciting. But we need to don't die on these little hills, right? Let's see how this evolves.
You're talking about not being an EV evangelist. And I know that you're doing stuff that is involved with other companies and partnering with other companies to do things that are moving technology forward and moving renewable energy forward. Talk to us a little bit about what you and your company are doing and how you became something other than what we might think you might be as a plug-in and charge company.
Well, I think I said at the top that I'm not fully formed. It's a journey. And I think that's true of GoStation as well. I think as we network and we meet folks around the globe that are working on similar things, or we have common investors, or we sit on a panel together or whatever, I met the CEO of this really exciting wind technology company out of Glasgow that are building this really cool device that allows converting ground level wind or even turbulence to energy. And this is a really exciting movement because wind technology today requires massive investment and huge infrastructure and these huge 300-meter tall wind turbines, and they're offshore and all this stuff. It's sort of inaccessible. And so if we can create efficiencies and put these things a lot closer to where there is demand for electricity, it opens up a lot of interesting renewable opportunities. Sun doesn't shine 24 hours a day. Wind in many places blows 24 hours a day, or in urban environments like the one behind me here downtown Austin, it whips around buildings. There's a really interesting dynamic around that stuff. And so I was talking with them, and their business is very hardware focused, which is good. But I said, well, what are you doing from a software perspective? What are you doing from an asset management perspective? What are you doing about network health monitoring, live monitoring? What are you doing about sustainability data? How are you generating revenue around renewable energy certificates? And they just had a full plate. And so I basically said, look, let's form a joint venture. We will take what GoStation has spent 6 or 7 years developing, which is really a software platform that's really good at remote asset management. Those assets happen to be, to date, EV charging stations, but they don't have to be. They could be really anything. And our secret weapon, or what makes us unique, is software. And so we're expanding for the first time to non-EV charging widgets. And we will manage these distributed energy generation systems in a way that really makes the investment easy to understand, quick to pay back, really the easy button for anybody from a homeowner all the way up to municipalities and other government entities to invest in these, what has been historically a very complex system to integrate.
The fact that you're integrating this, because as you said, there are so many factors, like I know that there are now home batteries. Tesla built some of those. Are they self-sustaining, or are they plugging into the grid, or is that something else again? Because I think that a lot of people who are very keen on clean energy would like their homes run on clean energy. But again, if it's plugged into a system that's dirty energy, kind of defeats the object.
Yeah, well, certainly with these distributed energy projects, whether it's a microgrid serving a community, you can imagine in the very near future, in fact, there are some today, that developers are buying a parcel of land. They're going to put a shopping center in there. They're going to put a number of single family homes, maybe an apartment complex, and some renewable energy generations, usually solar. But it's basically they're building a microgrid, and storage almost always needs to be a component of that. If you're not grid tied, or even if you are grid tied, you want to use the energy you generate when it's needed. And so these systems need to contemplate local storage. I think what's really exciting about that is you can imagine that if that happens at a wide scale, you've got this cache of energy storage, many megawatt hours of energy distributed geographically around an area. You think about places like California with these rolling blackouts and brownouts, there's a real need for backup emergency energy. In Texas, most of Texas is an unregulated power market. So there's an opportunity to buy and sell electricity. So all this concept of bi-directional flow, so vehicle to grid, or I think X to grid, storage to grid, or whatever, makes a lot of sense. And that's the type of infrastructure that we need to be building going forward, because it gives us the flexibility to generate energy in a lot of places, store it, and then use it where necessary. But none of that works if there are software systems that can communicate with one another, that have shared software protocols, that speak the same language, that can operate at the drop of a hat. But if you have that, if you're building that, even at a small scale or regional scale, you're beginning to build a really interesting, resilient system. And like I said, EV charging represents one load, but AI is another big one that's going to change the game. Also, we as a human race, we're getting a lot more urban. A lot of folks are moving to cities, and there's a lot more demand for electricity in concentrated areas. 5 or 10 years ago, only the most imaginative or those in the national labs could have told you about AI. I would venture to say that there's some technology out there, or technologies, that are going to do the same thing, that there's going to be step levels of demand on the grid. And so we need to be building for things we don't yet know about.
Yeah. It's interesting because, as I said, you've got this background in finance and then motorsports before you get into the world you're in. I talked about this in the introduction to the show. Entrepreneurship is a path for those who certainly don't mind risk, real entrepreneurship. You've got to have a level of embracing risk. And I think that it's become the new cool thing. Every cool person wants to be an entrepreneur, and it's not made for everybody, because you are a full-blown entrepreneur and you've definitely spanned across several industries. Tell us about what you think drives that in a person.
Boy, I think it's a lot of different things for different people, but I can speak about me. In the first episode, I talked about comfort being a slow death. I think I felt that my whole life, but I didn't know how to put words to it until I was inspired by that brand. And you know this about me, Dog. We take calculated risks across our life, in our personal lives. We moved to Texas. That was a calculated decision some years ago. When our house doubled in value, we sold it and we bought land. And we moved to that land and decided to move into an RV while we build on our property. We're unconventional. And by we, I mean my family, my wife and I. I think that's part of who I am and my personality. And I think that's probably true of a lot of true entrepreneurs, that there's just an element to them that the tried and true path, or what the other guy or gal does, is not a motivating factor. They're uniquely individual, and they're in pursuit of finding themselves for their whole lives. So it's not just at work that I'm this way. It's sort of in my personal life as well.
So What about that? You and I talked in our previous conversation about a lot of entrepreneurs are very committed to the grind and they really don't have much fun. They bullshit that it's fun. Don't get me wrong. They use that language, but I've met them. I know them. I've been around them. And a lot of them are not having any fun. They're just knackered, to use a British term. They're just worn out, living on 4 hours of sleep a night and claiming they're having fun. You have a philosophy around fun. Talk to us about your style.
Look, I'm not perfect. I have a lot of days where I'm knackered and I'm no fun to be around, but I think I always come back to, hey, this was supposed to be fun. And so there's a part of my personality that's sort of, it's not constant, but a pretty regular reevaluation of whether or not this is fun anymore and whatever this is. And the good news is that fun's a journey, not a destination. So you can recalibrate on a regular basis. It's really all about a philosophy of surrounding yourself with people you enjoy and can learn from and vice versa, and doing shit that's fun to do. Try to solve fun problems and take a little bit of, I don't know if this makes me a masochist or what, but you take a little bit of joy in trying to do the things people don't think you could do or that are doable. Like we said earlier, you fall on your face a lot of the time, but you hit one out of the park every once in a while, and that's awfully fun. And so I think spreading that feeling across the journey is a really important thing in life.
What do you think most people get wrong about entrepreneurship?
I think they're focused on the outcomes more than the journey. In other words, entrepreneurship to a lot of people are fancy cars and big houses and the success that's glorified. But I think those things come with results. I read a great John Wooden quote. John Wooden was the famous basketball coach for UCLA for many years. It won like 10 championships in a row. And I won't get this verbatim, but never mistake activity for achievement. Mm-hmm. And I used to say, don't mistake motion for progress. I like Wooden's better. He's a much better leader than I am. I think that's something a lot of people get wrong, that if you act busy and you think you're busy, that's the thing. That's entrepreneurship. But it's not. There's a grind. There's an effort that it takes, but it's about the outcomes. It's about the achievement. And you got to celebrate those, however little, however small. And that's what helps you have some fun. So I think focus on those little wins. A lot of people get that wrong. Don't worry about that big exit and the fancy stuff. Focus on that. You're not even looking at what's right outside of your windshield. You're going to probably put it in the ditch in the automotive parlance.
I think there's also a factor of, with the successful entrepreneurs that I have known and do know, it's interesting because we're all been sold on this idea of find your niche. And certainly there's value in that. I'm not taking that away. But at the same time, the most successful entrepreneurs I know are not in the business we think they're in. So for instance, it looks like you're in the renewable energy business, but you're actually in the software business. Would that be fair?
Yeah, it also looks like we're an EV charging company when really we're something different. Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's a lot of smarter people than I am who would promote the idea of being a generalist.
Right.
Be good enough at a lot of things and you're going to find a lot of success.
Right. And I get the find your niche thing, but to me, it's like really important to understand different aspects of a niche, which may look like something else altogether. And although the banner might say EV charging company, the layers below that allow you to enter into a room and have a conversation with this Scottish company you talked about who are doing wind, they're like, well, what the hell's that got to do with this? It doesn't seem to match. But it's that ability, having been in, as you said, in motorsports and in been in finance and been in other things, that allows you to put pieces together. And I think oftentimes when people go into entrepreneurship, they do go in for what you said, for the glamour and the glory. And, I'm going to be the guy in the photograph with the chicks on my arm in a push-up bra and on a private jet, and forget that there's a depth of emotional, mental investment beyond the finance. And that is in what I would say is in curiosity, in the willingness to learn. And I think that some of the best entrepreneurs I've ever met are deeply curious. They're driven by, oh, I thought it was this and now it's that. So in that context, how did you end up in this company?
Curiosity. You always have a North Star. But what I've learned over 20 years of doing this is you very rarely end up at the North Star you thought you were heading for, that the journey takes you in interesting directions. And so ironically, I worked for Penske Corporation and had 2 camps, Penske Corporation. A lot of people know that Penske truck rental, and they own a lot of dealerships and so on and so forth, but they're also famous for having a race team. And so I helped sort of run the commercial side of that with a group of colleagues. I was recruited away to run a division of a publicly traded company with responsibility over manufacturing. So again, curious, know a little bit about that, but I learned a whole lot and took that from a publicly traded setting and bought a small manufacturing company, a machine shop effectively, and built it into an advanced manufacturing company serving aerospace and the DOE and doing a lot of really interesting things that have nothing to do with where I started. Had an opportunity to sell that company and sort of found myself saying, well, what do I want to do when I grow up? And was introduced to the gentleman who's now GoStation's chairman, who comes from biopharmaceutical manufacturing. Really interesting backgrounds. If you'd asked me to map that out at the beginning, there's not a chance in hell I would have ever said that that was the journey. But I think you got to be intellectually curious, as you pointed out, and you got to say yes more than you say no.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that, man, it's going to be an interesting ride. And I'm going to keep doing that. After GoStation, I'm not likely to retire from GoStation, but we'll see what the next thing is.
Sure. So if I take you back, time travel you to meet with the child who is you, who is 10 or under, what would he think about the life you have, about the world you're in, the business you're in, and who you've become?
I think he'd be really excited about the motorsports stuff, but I think everything else would sound like I was an alien speaking Greek to him or something. If I was talking about renewable energy and AI and distributed generation and blockchain. But if I sat down and had that conversation, I think he'd be really intrigued that the world is a big place and that you're going to find some really interesting corners of it. I think the other thing that I would say, I was in a hurry for a lot of my life, in a hurry to get someplace, whatever that place was. And I think I would encourage 10-year-old and 15-year-old and even 20-year-old me to say, it's okay, slow down, be more present, and the rest is there. It'll come. It keeps coming at you. You'll get where you want to go, but don't be in a hurry so much that you don't enjoy and learn from where you are at this moment. And it took me a long time to really learn and embrace that, despite everybody telling me, right? But if I heard it from me, I might listen.
Was there somebody in your formative years who really believed in you?
Yeah, I think my dad did. He still does. He's the mergers and acquisitions corporate lawyer. And so I got a lot of exposure to his clients' businesses, which again, back to the generalist thing, that was everybody from scientists coming out of the Los Alamos National Labs to a guy that owned the Miller Beer distributorship to window companies. It was really a broad set of people and all very interesting. And I really love that. I think later in life, formative parts of my career, I was very lucky to have so much exposure to really, really great entrepreneurs. Some nobody knows and some that are very famous, like Roger Penske. You mentioned earlier, some of the best entrepreneurs are very curious. I think they're also never egotistical. Roger Penske's a self-made billionaire, but he remembers everybody's name. He'll go to one of his truck service locations in the middle of the country and he'll remember what the service manager's daughter did before she went to college. Now, I don't have a brain like that. I don't have a memory like that. But to show he means it when he says our people are our best asset, I learned a lot from that guy just being in his orbit. And there are others, but those are really memorable experiences in the formative years of me learning how to be a business guy and frankly, a man. And I'm immensely thankful for those experiences.
Was there somebody who didn't believe in you?
Sure. There were also a lot of jerks along the way, but I even gleaned some stuff from those experiences. There were some folks, I won't name names, but jerks along the way that told me wasn't doing it right or critical of this or that or the other thing, that frankly, some of those were good lessons. They just were poorly delivered or they were critical at the time, but I was able to grow from them. So I think for me, the lesson in that is there's something to learn from everybody and all these experiences. But maybe to cap off, I know we're getting close to time. The father of one of my high school classmates said, don't let the bastards get you down. I think that's a really good lesson too.
Nil desperandum caberandi. Don't let the bastards grind you down.
Cheers. Absolutely. That's right.
I know I bollocksed up the Latin on that. I used to know that quite well, but it's gone now.
That's how I would have sounded to 10-year-old me, by the way.
Like you were speaking ancient Latin.
Right, exactly.
So, Andrew, we are about out of time. I want to make sure that people do know how to reach you, your company, and your resources. Please tell everybody where they can find out more about those things.
Yeah, best place to look up me personally is probably on LinkedIn. Just search for my name, Andrew Hisey. You can also find GoStation there as well. And then our website is gostation.com, go-station.com. And on those channels, we will soon announce this new venture that I have alluded to in this episode. So stay tuned if you're interested in that stuff. I'm always interested in meeting other entrepreneurs, anybody really in any space. One thing we haven't talked about is the value of building a team of compatriots. So other CEOs that have been knocked down and gotten up and raised money and been told they're stupid and don't know what they're talking about. I've been there. And so any of those people I'd love to meet and talk to and learn from and vice versa. And also any of those people starting their journey that are maybe looking down the gauntlet of big dreams and things like that. I always would love to give back and had some really great people do that for me. So if I can pay it forward, I want to.
Beautiful. We'll make sure that all of those links are posted in the show notes. Andrew, thank you for all that you've shared today. And for you, dear listener, remember that those who control the meaning for the tribe also control the movement of that tribe. Leaders who are committed to positively shaping the political and business landscape know that they must tap into what drives human behavior. I'm Dov Barron. I show businesses, teams, and leaders how to harness their emotional source code to move their tribe. Because unified, actualized meaning is the single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for individuals and companies. Remember, we always need your help in staying relevant, so please go to wherever it is that you tune into the podcast from and do us a favor, rate, review, and subscribe. And of course, a big thank you for you if you are a regular listener for sharing the show with everybody you know. It means a lot to us. Till next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about not just renewable energy, which we've talked a lot about, but maybe the things that are going on underneath all that, including the software and the psychology of what it takes to be an entrepreneur. As Andrew talked about, can you actually have fun at it, or are you just committed to the grind? It's going to be a grind anyway, but if you're not having any fun, what's the point? I'm Dov Barron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.